Hello, welcome back to Far Horizons Gaming. My name is Ben, and today we're turned into Suzerain. So I know it's been a little while, but last time we left off, went to the President's inaugurational ball where one of the members of Parliament was assassinated. So the last episode ended off with trying to deal with some of the political fallout from that and trying to head some of that off. So we're just going to pick right up from there. Let's start off taking a look at the newspaper here. I have one unread newspaper, apparently. The Lockhaven Times. The new assembly begins duty. President Anton Rain has been elected 4th president of Swordland in the 7th Swordish elections. The United Swordland Party has won the election on Sunday with just over 37% of the vote, while Franz Richter, the leader of the People's Freedom and Justice Party, could gain just over 20%. Casado Kiebner, the head of the right-wing National Front Party, in 3rd place with just over 11%. The Communist Party of Swordland and the Workers' Party of Bludia both won just below 10% of the vote, failing to pass the 10% election threshold. The new term begins with the opposition of PF, JP, and NFP under the USP government. The unrepresented votes below the threshold resulted in the USP taking 52% of the seats in the Grand National Assembly, giving them the lawmaking power. The new seat numbers have been finalized as follows: USP 130, PFJP 70, NFP 40, and Independents 10. And then, yes, that's the news from last time when, yes, Bernard Circus, that was the guy. One of the communist members of parliament. Assassinated by the far-right nationalists. So, I think all that's left is to continue. It should move on to the next part of the story. Yeah, proceed to next turn, whatever. A few days later. There we go. Alright, let's start with the newspapers again here. Alright, the Whole Sword Post. Swordish politician shot dead. This is just going back to the assassination again. A Swordish poet and politician who had spoken out about the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat was shot during the evening of Anton Rain's inauguration ball. Bernard Circus, a 53-year-old Swordish member of Assembly, was shot a number of times by gunmen at the entrance to the Maroon Palace, who was identified to be a member of the Young Swords. Despite his radical views, Mr. Circus was elected to be an independent member of Assembly in the 1953 elections, and sadly did not manage to live long enough to serve his duty. He is said to have repeatedly received threats from Swordish nationalists, who viewed him as a traitor for promoting millennialism in Swordland. I have to look at that. Is that basically... Okay. So that looks like it's like Leninism or something. The television footage showed the famous poet's body lying face down, draped with a white sheet, on the pavement in front of the gates of the Maroon Palace. Lilias Graf, the Interior Minister, said she had assigned a group of leading ministry officials to lead the hunt for the killers. Once again, dark hands have chosen our country and spilled blood in whole sword to achieve their dark goals, she told the news conference. We are investigating all aspects of this crime. His funeral will be held tomorrow in his home city, Deer. The local police have reported to have increased security measures for the ceremony and stand ready for massive attendance. Alright, Swordland today actually looks like they might have a positive news article for change. Unity despite differences. Swordland has two paths to the future, and this year is critical to decide which path we embark upon. Amid a recession, the lack of stability and security caused by the death of Bernard Circus is an unacceptable reality. We need more jobs and a safe atmosphere if a country is supposed to grow and prosper. But how will we increase our employment and open new factories if there's blood flowing down the streets? Swordland will never reach its goals as an advanced society if we descend in a downward spiral of a splintering of our nation. Peace and prosperity now and forever. That wasn't quite as positive as the headline suggested, but I like the sentiment. Alright, back to the Lockhaven Times. Murder was a method of the past. The tensions between the left and right extremists have increased in the country after the assassination of MP Bernard Circus. Members of millennialist groups quickly turned into protests of millennialist riots. Quickly turned into riots around the country. We are calling for peaceful protests and dialogue instead of violence. After the attack that prompted the riots, a member of Young Swords assassinating a member of Assembly clearly shows their that they are willing to use extreme action, says Franz Richter in his speech in the Grand National Assembly. We live within these borders together, and therefore we all bear a responsibility, a duty to live together with our differences. Richter's unifying message is something we all should listen to in these times of danger of loss. The murder was a method of the past and has tainted us, reminding us of who we were before and who we don't want to become in the future, said Richter. He stated that we, as the citizens of his nation, all bear responsibility beyond ideologies, partisanship, or any other identity. Shit, that's a message that honestly works really well outside of the game here as well. Nice. All said. Alright. Radical, which I believe is the communist newspaper. That's for Farewell Bernard Circus. It is a sad moment for Sordland. We have lost a renowned poet who not only wrote about the struggles of the working class, but also acted on them. However, his decision to enter Swedish politics was met with a sick attack that ended his life. This was indeed intended as a message to all opposing voices in Sordland. We, the team here at the Radical, condemn this evil act of terror of the young swords, who we believe must be held accountable as a whole group. It's finally time for the government to realize this organization is a terrorist threat and to serve the justice that is due. Bernard Circus is always going to be in our hearts as a great Swedish poet, as a revolutionary, as a leader of the Swedish avant-garde, as a futurist, as a romantic, as millennialist, but beyond all as a symbol of freedom of speech. He is now a man who is murdered for speaking his mind. This cannot remain as yet another political murder of the sad reality of Sordland. In fact, it is time to change this. It is time to speak up as a people. The most beautiful sea hasn't been crossed yet, said the great poet, reminding us to always have hope. And we must strive to have hope and to make them all a reality. It is the best way to honor his memory. Bernard Circus will be laid down in Deer tomorrow. Any citizen who wants to pay respect is invited to attend. And last but not least, The Economist. Or Economists, sorry. The only way out of recession, bailing out businesses. Sordland's economy has been displaying a downward trend over the past 2 years of Alfonso's presidency. If we want to prevent our country from declaring bankruptcy, we need a way out of this recession, and we need it now. The economic downturn keeps hitting hard at the businesses which are struggling to stay afloat. It is clear that a helping hand from the government is required to control the situation. There is no other way, apart from bailing out businesses, to truly provide relief to the economy. This, in turn, should revitalize the economy by creating more employment opportunities and increasing production in Sordland. Cool, alright. So, it looks like we've got a few things at the Capitol, but there's a whole bunch of little reports. So we're just going to start here at the top and kind of work our way around in a circle. Alright, report from Agnolia. Orton critiques trade. The leader of Agnolia has diplomatically critiqued the imbalance of trade between our countries. Concerns were raised over how much more Sordland profits from net trade in comparison to Agnolia. Prime Minister Martin van Horten requests a fair reevaluation of existing treaties in future negotiations. Well, that sounds like a fair request. So I guess we'll have to look into that at some point. Alright, report from Estord. Police overburdened in Estord. We've been receiving reports of a lack of equipment and staff from the police forces in Estord. With the escalating violence in the city, the officers have been working 12-hour shifts to suppress the protests with no avail. To no avail. The police commissioner of Estord has requested reinforcements and extra supplies of tear gas from nearby cities. That doesn't sound good. Might be another thing we have to keep an eye on. I'm guessing all this stuff we have to keep an eye on, but whatever, it's fine. Alright, from Narbel, again, understaffed police. Narbel has reported that it is currently too understaffed to deal with the ongoing political violence. Due to the small size of the police force in the city, they have been working non-stop, and a number of officers were sent to hospital as a result of severe fatigue. Minister of the Interior, Lilias Graf, has been working with head of police Karl Greiser to address the issue. Looks like there's a lot of issues with policing in this country, which that's got to be handled pretty carefully. Alright, the Republic of Valen. Smolak warns traders. The latest diplomatic message from the leader of Valen warned us regarding a pathway from the mountains of Bergia that allows traders of the state escaping Sordland. President Viktor Smolak has demanded that the border security be increased. He also sent his best wishes about handling the protests in Sordland. Okay, I get it. So, supposedly traders are fleeing through a mountain pass and escaping into Sordland here. Okay. Alright, from Suzerain. Young Swords Youth Wing leader dead after terror attack. Local Young Swords Youth Wing leader in Suzerain, Jacques Toyrin, has claimed responsibility for the organized attack in the Blutish market that resulted in the death of 7. His base of operations have been raided, and he was found dead inside with 2 bullets to the back of the head. The scene was organized to make it look like a suicide. We were not able to get information about the location of other ringleaders connected to the terrorist attack. Nice. Okay, so the fascists are just continuing their reign of terror and killing more people. Alright. Illegal KA-74 seized. A cache found with Rumberg-made weapons included 46 KA-74s, 2,854 bullets, 12 handguns, 27 grenades, and bomb-making equipment was found in the basement of an abandoned house in Suzerain. No suspects have been detained yet. The investigation is ongoing to determine the origins of the equipment. Right, so we got some AK-47 knockoffs. That's cool. Alright, how about robbery here? Illegal firearms found in Communist Party office. The Rebray Police Department raided the local Communist Party office after alleged attacks organized by one of their members. Found illegal firearms in the office. The building has been closed. 22 members of the Communist Party of Sordland have been detained. Cool, so the Communists are gearing up for war to fight back against the fascists. This is turning into a nice little thing here. Alright, weapons seized in Cultural Center. Local police forces report that a wardrobe full of heavy military equipment has been seized in a Young Swords Cultural Center in Gen. Regulars of the place denied having any knowledge about the weapons. The owners of the building have been detained along with 13 other people. Police captured 22 rifles and 2 machine guns. The equipment belonged to the Swedish Armed Forces, dated 1929, but kept in very good condition. So that's the fascists again. Communist Party leader suspected of bomb attack. Good lord. At 11:48 a.m., an unattended bag in front of the NFP office in Volgan was destroyed by the police on suspicions of a bomb threat, which were then verified. Under further investigation, the Communist Party leader Volgan, Milts Hanu, has been arrested in connection to the incident. And that appears to be everything. Nice, so looks like we've got a political civil war going here with the communists and the fascists trying to kill each other. That could be an interesting situation if we don't get that under control. Alright, reports of BFF activity in the capital. Chief of Police Karl Geiser reports that 2 Blutish women with affiliations to the Blutish Freedom Front, BFF, have been caught in Holzord before they could execute a terror attack at a crowded rally. Both women are listed as wanted criminals, enemies of the state. The arrested women have admitted their intentions to attack the National Front Party's rally at Seoul Square when Casaro Kiebner gave a speech, but rejected any connections to the BFF. Both claim they're acting alone. Police reports that the situation is under control and further investigations are underway. Okay, so the Bloods are an oppressed minority group. Looks like they're attempting to strike out at the fascist nationalist party as well. So it looks like they're pretty much universally hated here. Okay, alright. And yeah, there you go. Security briefing on the threats against Sordland. We're going to start out with dinner with the family. Something hopefully a little bit lighter here first. Alright. After a long day at the palace, I was finally home. I thanked Serge and walked through the front gates, nodding at the 2 guards as I went by. Even as I turned the doorknob, I could hear Deanna rushing down the stairs to greet me. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of me with expectant eyes. "Papa, you're home." Lift and hug her. I lifted Deanna up and hugged her while trying to put the keys in the tray next to the entrance. Alright, nice. Even the president just dumps his keys next to the front door. She was growing up fast. Lifting her up was no longer as easy as it once was. How was school? Boring. I liked my old school better. I put her down, her expression turned serious. Papa, are the bad men gone? There's only one bad man, Deanna, and yes, he's gone now. Okay, Papa. Deanna rushed down the hallway. Mama, Papa's here. Monica appeared next to the kitchen door. She was wearing an apron and holding a spatula in her hand. Deanna, what did I tell you? No running in the house. Yes, Mama. Monica approached me and kissed me on the cheek. A tantalizing smell wafted from the kitchen behind her. Yeah, how was your day, dear? Terrific. I finally got to do some grocery shopping just like old times. And I'm making your favorite. You mean? Yes, svabli. Whatever the hell that is. Oh. Svabli was a classic whole-sort delicacy. Vegetables and creamy sheep cheese sandwiched between layers of dough. Like some sort of a dumpling, I guess? It's absolutely my favorite dish, especially paired with Kabij, a potent, unfiltered wine from Berja. It's my lucky day. What's the occasion? No occasion. I just wanted to cheer everyone up a bit. Her smile faded. She lowered her voice so that Deanna wouldn't hear. Especially after what happened at the ball. I'm worried, Anton. For you, for the children, and for the country. Deanna suddenly appeared next to us. Mama? Yes, sweetheart? I'm hungry. We'll eat in just a minute. Will you help me set the table? Anton, can you tell Frank to come down for dinner? He's been sulking in his room all day. Monica started taking out the china while I headed upstairs to fetch my son. Loud rock and roll music echoed down the hallway from his room. I caught a faint hint of cigarette smoke. Just knock on the door. He's a teenager. Don't want to know what he's doing in there. I knocked on the door. There was no response. Knock on the door again. There's still no response. Alright, start banging on the door. Maybe he just can't hear us. I banged on the door. The stereo in Frank's room clicked off. Alright. He unlocked and opened the door. What do you want? Let's be nice to the kid. Dinner's ready. Great, I'm starving. Frank headed downstairs to the dining room and I followed after. The table was prepared and Monica was ladling food onto the plates. Come on, have a seat. It won't be as tasty if it's cold. As we started eating, the room went quiet. Monica's cooking was as delicious as ever, but I had the feeling that wasn't the reason nobody spoke. Monica was the first to break the silence. Say, did you know that they refurbished the grocery store? I don't know if you remember the owner. He's been there every day for the past 30 years. Can you imagine doing the same job for so long? What if you're president for 20 years, for example? I don't want this country to suffer under another soul. Yeah, agreed. That must never happen again. Anyway, the grocer really is a nice person. He threw in some extra vegetables with my... Frank suddenly slammed his hands on the table, rattling the china. Monica, Deanna, and I stared at him. So this is how it's going to be? We're just going to sit here like nothing happened? Dad, you could have been killed. Mom could have been killed. Any one of us could have died. Deanna's lower lip started trembling. Monica put her hand on Frank's shoulder. Frank, you know I would never let anything happen to you or Deanna, even if it cost me my life. I know, but still. Can you at least tell me if something's being done about this? It was real close, Dad. It was one rogue shooter. We weren't even the target. But what if we were? Frank, listen to your father. If your father says we don't need to worry, then we don't need to worry. You have to trust him. Monica turned to me. We all have to trust each other. Things calmed down a bit at the table. We finished our food in silence. Frank got up first and retreated back to his room. Monica lifted Deanna up and plopped her in front of the living room TV before returning to the table. She sat down across from me. Anton, he is still young. Yeah, that's what worries me. I made plenty of rash decisions when I was his age. You make plenty of rash decisions now, too. Frank's not the only one who's scared, Anton. I worry too, Monica. Things might escalate. She got up, stood behind me, and massaged my shoulders for a moment before leaving me alone in the dining room. I sat alone at the table, enjoying my glass of cabbage. Had I been lying to Frank and Deanna? Was the threat to my family truly over? Time would tell. Alright, and got a couple more news articles. Let's check those out before we move on again. These look like they're probably going to be relevant to the next story beat here. So, protests across Sordland. Protests erupted around Sordland after the death of Bernard Circus, many of which started peaceful but soon turned violent. Protesters with red youth flags were seen in most central cities around Sordland, carrying out violent riots, organizing protests that disrupted much vital services from being delivered to the Sordish people. Protesters held sit-ins, which were broken up by riot police with tear gas and water cannons in the regions of Bergia, Einland, and Gruni. Thousands of people poured into Republic Avenue in Lockhaven and Soul Square in Holzord in response to the Young Swords attack. Similar protests around Sordland soon turned into violent riots. So that was from the Holzord Post. Sordland today. Protests in Gruni. Protests are taking place throughout the Gruni region in response to the assassination of Bernard Circus. The protesters raise their concerns about the Young Swords, the increased cost of living, and inequality prevalent in the country. Large rallies have been organized in the city centers of Benfey and Boren. A large congregation of Red Youth members have organized sit-ins and protests aimed at hampering public transportation in the city of Volgan, which brought the city to a standstill for a few hours before riot police came to disperse large groups of protesters at transportation nodes. The Lockhaven Times. Political chaos. Political violence has surrounded Sordland since yesterday. While officials from the police claim to have the situation under control, protests are turning into riots, and violent attacks are occurring around the country. NFP and LUS call for protests. Casado Kibner of the National Front Party called a rally to condemn communist influence from United Contana and called the violent protesters traitors to Sordland. These millennivists are roaming in our streets, conducting violent attacks in disguise as peaceful protesters. We can't let them exploit a man's murder, said Kibner in a press conference. On the other hand, the Labor Union of Sordland has gathered to condemn nationalist violence in Sordland. The protests gathered crowds of several thousand, and agitators from both sides in Holzord, and acts of vandalism occurred. Katrina Horton accused Kibner for provoking the public. Katarina Horton. Sorry. Young Swords vandalized shops. A group of people with Young Swords flags have vandalized a dozen of shops? Some weird typos in this game, but it's all good. Vandalized a dozen shops in the trade district of Anarka, specifically targeting the Bludish and Anya-Sordish minorities. The shop owners who defended themselves were wounded in the attacks. The local police broke the groups apart. NFP office burned. A group of violent militants have assaulted the National Front Party headquarters in Morna and committed arson. Firefighters have been called to the scene where fires raged for hours on end. Several nearby homes burned to the ground before it was brought under control. So shit is definitely getting out of control in this country. Which leads us to the security briefing on the threats against Sordland. I arrived in front of the doors leading to the Situation Room. Today's security briefing was arranged in two parts, starting with internal matters and moving on to external matters after a short break. Minister of Interior Lilias Graf and Minister of Justice and Law Nia Morna would join us for the first part, the law enforcement briefing. In the second part, the Minister of Defense, Josef Lancia, would join with a few high-ranking officials, including the Chief of the Armed Forces, Vulcan Kruger. I opened the door. Lucian, Nia, and Lilius rose from their seats. Sir. Let's begin. Everyone in the room sat down except for Lucian. He put on his glasses and went through the documents in front of him. Shortly after, he raised his head to address the attendees. Mr. President, ladies, we will kick off today's meeting with the internal security briefing. I am assuming everyone has already been over the agenda. We all have busy schedules, so without further ado, I'll jump into our first topic. As we feared, the political atmosphere has worsened.
The reports from around the country indicate that tensions are rising as we feared.
I don't think that voice is quite right, but it's close enough.
What is the status of the Bernard Circus investigation?
Let's see, Lilius.
I have received news this morning that the investigation into the murder of Bernard Circus has concluded.
Please enlighten us. The more we know, the better.
After further investigation testimonies, we have confirmed the motive and also the events leading up to the shooting. A few days prior, members of the Red Youth initiated a violent attack on a Young Swords leader in Jen. We believe the Young Swords then called a revenge, leading to the death of Mr. Circus. Since he often spoke against the Young Swords and national sentiments in the Assembly, he was a big target, not to mention his radical communist views.
God, political violence needs to stop now.
Yes, we've kept it at bay for so long, but it seems that there are now new triggers.
Lilius handed over the report and pointed to a highlighted section of the document.
The investigation revealed a very troubling fact. The funding sources of the Red Youth have a clear link to United Cantana.
Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?
Yes, we found the cash trail. Several Red Youth members with ties to United Cantana have been detained, and the information extracted from them points to preparation for a communist uprising in Sordland.
It isn't unusual for the superpowers to influence other nations, but I think this case is a little far-fetched. The left lacks popular support in Sordland.
Nia eagerly lifted her hand. I motioned for her to speak.
I went over the report in detail. It would be wrong to jump to conclusions about a clear foreign influence yet. United Cantana has humanitarian and cultural ties with many countries, including Sordland.
I also don't want to jump to conclusions. We shouldn't create a crisis with them.
Nearly 3 decades ago, they funded General Ricard and tried to establish a communist dictatorship in our country. If it was not for Colonel Sol, we would have seen the real crisis.
She took a sip from her glass of water and continued.
Our police chief Karl Greisler has linked the funding channel to the United Cantana consulate in Benfi. As we all know, the enemies of Sordland are many, but we also have threats inside the country.
We need to remain vigilant as a people and a nation.
If we give up essential freedoms to purchase temporary security, we deserve neither freedom nor security.
This is debatable, but yes, we know what more security and surveillance caused to this country under President Sol.
Let's not forget that President Sol, God bless him, brought stability after a long period of bloodshed and chaos. But, moving on. Our highest and general threat comes from the estimated 20,000-strong Brutish Freedom Front, led by the imprisoned Dulin Arge. They are a banned political organization, now militant force that is trying to incite racial violence.
Are they supported by our Brutish citizens?
To some extent. Luckily, they couldn't attract a wide audience of Bloods, but they could potentially attract thousands if anti-Brutish sentiment spreads in Sordland again.
Lilius pointed to page 3 in the report.
Our intelligence intercepted 2 crates filled with weapons close to the Romberg border. They are filled with military-grade Ka-74s. We expect that more have been smuggled in since a group of Bloods were caught with these guns at a checkpoint not far away.
Romberg has been acting aggressively in the region for a long time. I am not surprised they would attempt to weaponize the British people against us. This is worrying. Very worrying.
Okay. We need to keep level-headed with Romberg. They're looking for reasons to take action.
They'll play dirty while we play nice. It's a battle we will lose. Oh, this is grave news. Oh, God, that was bad. This is grave news, but we must be careful not to stoke the fires of anti-British sentiment. What is the second most important threat? It is the gang violence that is threatening the Nagis and Einland regions. Two prominent organized crime families are at war, and the potential for bloodshed is real. Which two crime families? One is known as the Coronelli, and the other as the Skinner Cartel. They used to be allies until a recent disagreement. Both are active in the cities of Narbil and Estord. Lilius, I trust you can handle them. I am doing my best, sir. Lilius Groff sighed deeply. I shall be honest with you. With our current capabilities, we may not be able to prevent the further arming of separatists while maintaining order in Berger, Nagas, and Einland. If the law enforcement budget isn't increased, I can't be fully responsible for what happens. Our police units are spread thin as is. In light of this information, I might increase the law enforcement budget. We will rid our country of separatists and violent thugs if we do so. Well, I wish you'd stop using the word thugs, Elias. The real problem is corruption, which is fueling the gang violence and is very likely the reason why these weapons were smuggled in. A higher budget could help us end that threat. Your ministry must tackle the issue with persistence, Miss Morna. We are, but it needs all the attention it can get from our administration. Lilius and Nia were openly scowling at each other. Lilius turned back to her notes. Well, this concludes the topics for the internal portion.
Thank you for the updates, Mrs. Graf, Mrs. Morna.
Yes, thank you for the overview.
Right, have a good day. Until next time.
The two ministers left the room. We took a short break before continuing to the second part. Upon invitation, Josef Lancia, along with three high-ranking officials from the Ministry of Defense, walked into the room. One of the men was none other than General Kruger, the chief of the armed forces. Guessing that's this creepy-looking dude. Yep. Josef made his way towards the table while the others stood by the door.
Mr. President.
Josef, welcome.
I brought General Kruger with me due to the escalations on our borders.
General Kruger stepped forward and saluted. He had a strong jaw with sharp cheekbones. His tall stature, uniform and medals, combined with his deep and intense stare, made him look threatening. He was in his 70s, yet he had a bulky body that was a result of his commando training. Not only was he the second most decorated officer in Swordland, he was also the longest serving. General Kruger. What's a good voice for this guy?
Mr. President, it is an honor.
Josef tapped his foot impatiently. He seemed uneasy with the presence of another high-ranking officer in the room.
Gentlemen, thanks for coming to this significant gathering. Let's begin.
Josef and Vulcan took their seats at the table, while the rest of the officers stood by the door.
Mr. President, the situation at the western and northern borders towards Rumberg is very tense. We are observing deployments of divisions closer to our border.
There we go. There's a weird cutoff there.
Rumberg has been acting increasingly expansionist in the past decades, and also interfered in Agnolia, but now they have turned their sights on us.
This concerns me very much.
We are observing these areas actively. Our contingency plans are ready.
It seems like they want to increase the pressure both externally and internally.
Mr. President, if I may.
Please, General.
The picture is becoming clearer. The latest information from the interior about the weapons caches, and now there is an active military build-up close to our borders. The entire situation was analyzed by our General Staff and our predictions of future territorial incursion by Rumberg.
I have complete trust in the General Staff.
We will not let you down, Mr. President. The General Staff is composed of the smartest military individuals. I require an increase in the military budget to enlist more soldiers. Only then we can stand strong against our enemies. The enlarged armed forces will hold them at bay. Falcon is right. We do need an increase in the military budget. Although we don't see eye to eye on exactly how to spend that budget, that much we agree on. I have my concerns about Rumberg too. We need strong allies to withstand such a superior power. They are our nemesis. That is an understatement. Times are changing and war is coming, Mr. President, whether we like it or not. We must be prepared. During the election, you said nothing about focusing on our military. I ask you to reconsider and to increase the military budget. The future and safety of Swordsland is in your hands.
As you said before, times change, Yosef. We will see. A smile brought a glimmer of hope on Yosef's face.
Our forces would crumble under a decrease, and Rumberg would be much more compelled to exploit our weakness. Our country hasn't fallen to any invading force for 200 years. You cannot let it happen, Mr. President.
We should find regional allies like Volksland or Lesbia to deter Rumberg. There are several options on the table. Rumberg would attack a nation allied with any superpower.
One shudders at the sacrifices they would require us to make. Yes, but what is the difference between losing your independence to one or the other?
Everyone fell silent when a soldier entered the room and let Yosef Valencia know that a call had come through from ministry.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yosef left the room to answer. A few minutes later, he entered the room again. His expression had changed.
Mr. President, there has been Rumbergian military activity close to the Noble border. I just spoke with the local commander. Falcon, we should go to the ministry and get further updates from the branches. Understood. Raising military readiness is a first call of action. If there is truly an extraordinary attempt, we will relate it to you immediately and wait for further orders, Mr. President.
Remain calm. Make sure not to escalate things further. Nobody wants a war.
We will exercise utmost caution, Mr. President. Yes, Swordsland.
They saluted and left the room. Rumberg was already testing us, and the reports from the interior indicate interference inside our borders. Communists, nationalists, British rebels, Rumberg expansionism was next. Swordsland had always been a key piece in the chessboard of the global rivalry between Arcasia and United Contana. But in recent years, there's no such aggression from Rumberg, not at these levels at least. All it takes is one tiny spark to start the flames of war. The phone rang. Rumberg had decided to close their consulate in Lockhaven. Fantastic. It's never a good sign when they decide to start pulling their politicians out of your country. Alright. Well, that seems like as good a place as any to go and stop for this episode. So I'll be sure to pick this up again here shortly. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see y'all next time.